The shrill ring of the phone shattered the stillness of the night. I reached for it, my hand instinctively grasping the handle of the knife under my pillow. Old habits die hard. "Lucas Moore," I answered, my voice low and rough with sleep. "Lucas, it's Sheriff Hansen from Millhaven." The voice on the line was strained, almost frantic. "I got your number from a friend. Said you're the guy to call when things get weird." I sat up, instantly alert. Weird was putting it mildly when it came to the things I dealt with. "What's the problem, Sheriff?" "We've got bodies, Lucas. Torn to pieces. And people vanishing into thin air." Hansen's voice dropped to a hoarse whisper. "The folks here, they're talking about a monster. Something straight out of a nightmare." I was already pulling on my boots, the phone cradled against my shoulder. "Give me the details." As Hansen recounted the gruesome facts, a familiar chill crept up my spine. Victims ripped apart, partially eaten. A large, wolf-like creature spotted stalking the woods. And all of it starting just after the recent lunar eclipse. "I'm on my way," I said, ending the call abruptly. I paused, my gaze falling on the faded photograph tacked to the wall. Mallory's smiling face looked back at me, forever frozen in a moment of happiness. A happiness I'd failed to protect. I swallowed hard, pushing down the old guilt and rage. Millhaven had already taken so much from me. Now, it seemed the past was calling me back, demanding more blood, more pain. I arrived in Millhaven as the first light of dawn was seeping through the trees, casting shadows across the sleepy town. The place looked just as I remembered, a cluster of faded buildings nestled in the heart of the dense forest. But there was a heaviness in the air now, a sense of dread that hung over everything like a funeral shroud. Sheriff Hansen was waiting for me outside the morgue, his face ashen. "Thank God you're here, Lucas. It's worse than I described." He led me inside, to where the bodies lay beneath blood-soaked sheets. I braced myself before pulling back the first one, but nothing could have prepared me for the sheer brutality of what lay beneath. The corpse was barely recognizable as human. Flesh shredded, bones splintered, organs scattered like grisly confetti. But it was the savagery of it all that made my stomach turn. This was no mere animal attack. There was a malevolent intelligence behind each vicious slash, each ragged bite. "What in God's name could have done this?" Hansen asked, his voice trembling. I shook my head, a grim realization already taking hold. "Nothing of God, Sheriff. That much I can promise you." As darkness fell, I holed up in my room at the local inn. If my hunch was right, Millhaven was about to become a hunting ground for a nightmare made flesh, and I was the only thing standing between the town and utter devastation. But why here? Why now, after all these years? The questions gnawed at me as I methodically loaded my weapons, the silver bullets gleaming coldly in the moonlight. Then the phone rang, jolting me from my concentration. The sheriff. It was a new crime scene. The night pressed in around me as I stepped out of the inn, the chill air biting at my exposed skin. I shrugged deeper into my worn leather jacket, checking the comforting weight of the revolver at my hip. Silver bullets, consecrated and blessed. A last resort against the horrors that lurked in the darkness. I made my way down the deserted streets, my boots echoing hollowly on the pavement. Millhaven was a ghost town, the windows dark and shuttered, the doors barred against the night. The only signs of life were the scattered missing person posters fluttering in the breeze, their faded faces staring out at me like accusatory specters. I turned down a narrow alley, following the directions Sheriff Hansen had given me. The crime scene was just ahead, cordoned off with yellow police tape. I ducked under it, my senses on high alert. The stench of blood and decay hit me like a physical blow. I gagged, bile rising in my throat. I'd seen my share of gruesome sights in my line of work, but this was something else entirely. The alley was a slaughterhouse. Blood splattered the walls, pooling in dark, sticky puddles on the ground. Chunks of flesh and shattered bone littered the scene, as if something had torn the victim apart with savage fury. And there, in the center of it all, was the body. Or rather, what was left of it. I approached cautiously, my hand resting on the butt of my gun. The corpse had been ravaged, ripped open from throat to groin. Ribs jutted out at odd angles, gleaming wetly in the moonlight. Internal organs spilled out like macabre streamers. But it was the face that made my blood run cold. Even in death, the features were contorted in a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. The eyes stared sightlessly up at the sky, the mouth frozen in a silent scream. I forced myself to look closer, searching for any clues that might help me understand what I was up against. The wounds were jagged, brutal, the flesh torn rather than cut. And there, around the edges of the gaping holes, I saw them. Tooth marks. A shudder ran through me. No human could have inflicted this kind of damage. No animal, either. This was the work of something else, something unnatural, something that hungered for human flesh and reveled in pain and fear. I straightened up, my mind racing. I needed to find out more about the other victims, to see if there was a pattern, a connection that might lead me to the creature stalking Millhaven's streets. I turned to leave, but something caught my eye. In the shadows at the far end of the alley, a flicker of movement. I squinted, my hand tightening on my gun. A pair of glowing red eyes stared back at me, set in a lupine face that was all too human. A low growl rumbled through the air, vibrating in my chest. I froze, my heart pounding. I drew my gun, the metal cold against my palm. But before I could take aim, the creature lunged, a blur of shadow and teeth and fury. I fired, the shot deafening in the confined space. The silver bullet struck the Revenant in the shoulder, eliciting a howl of pain and rage. But it kept coming, its claws outstretched, its jaws slavering. I dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the creature's charge. I rolled to my feet, firing again. This time, the bullet grazed the Revenant's skull, sending a spray of black ichor spattering across the alley. The creature stumbled, shaking its head. I took aim for a third shot, but it was too fast. With a snarl, it leapt up, scaling the alley wall with inhuman agility. In seconds, it had vanished over the rooftops, leaving me alone with the still-warm corpse and the stench of my own fear. I lowered my gun, my hands shaking. I'd faced monsters before, but nothing like this. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing thoughts. I needed a plan, a way to track this thing down and put an end to its reign of terror. But to do that, I needed to know more. About the creature, about its victims, about the dark secrets lurking in Millhaven's past. I cast one last glance at the ravaged corpse, a silent promise forming in my mind. I would find this monster, and I would destroy it. No matter the cost, no matter the sacrifice. For a moment, Mallory's face flashed before my eyes, her laugh echoing in my ears. I pushed the memory away, burying it deep. I couldn't afford to be distracted, not now, not with so much at stake. I turned and walked out of the alley, into the waiting darkness. The hunt was just beginning, and I had a feeling it was going to be a long, bloody night. The night hung heavy around me as I made my way back to the inn, my mind racing with the horrors I'd just witnessed. I could still feel the heat of its fetid breath on my face, the glint of madness in its blood-red eyes. I pushed open the door to my room, the hinges creaking in protest. The space was Spartan, just a narrow bed and a battered desk, my weapons and gear spread out across the surface. I sat down heavily on the edge of the mattress, my head in my hands. I needed a plan, a way to track this thing down and put an end to its reign of terror. But where to start? The creature seemed to strike at random, leaving no pattern, no clues to its whereabouts. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. Father Mikhail, a priest who'd helped me out on a few cases involving the supernatural. The phone rang once, twice, then clicked as Mikhail answered. "Lucas," he said, his voice heavy with concern. "I heard about what's happening in Millhaven. Are you all right?" I let out a bitter laugh. I'm still breathing, if that's what you mean. But this thing, Mikhail, it's like nothing I've ever seen before. I need your help. There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. The Lycan Revenant is a creature of immense power and evil. It is not to be trifled with, Lucas. You must be careful. I don't have a choice, I said grimly. This thing is tearing Millhaven apart, and I'm the only one who can stop it. What can you tell me about it? Mikhail sighed. The Lycan Revenant is a twisted abomination, a werewolf that has been reanimated through dark magic. It possesses all the strength and savagery of a normal lycanthrope, but with a cunning intelligence and a hunger for human flesh that can never be sated. I felt a chill run down my spine. How do I kill it? Silver will wound it, but to truly destroy the Revenant, you must pierce its heart with a blade blessed by a priest. Only then will its cursed soul be banished back to the hell that spawned it. I glanced at the silver dagger lying on the desk, its blade gleaming dully in the lamplight. I have a weapon. Can you bless it for me? I can, Mikhail said. But Lucas, you must understand the danger you face. The Lycan Revenant will stop at nothing to destroy you, to feast upon your flesh and add your strength to its own. You are walking into the very jaws of death. I closed my eyes, Mallory's face swimming before me. I know, I said softly. But I don't have a choice. I have to end this, Mikhail. For her. There was a long pause. I understand. Bring me the dagger, and I will do what I can. And Lucas, may God be with you. The line went dead, and I sat there for a long moment, staring at the phone in my hand. Then I stood, gathering up my weapons and gear. There was no time to waste. The Lycan Revenant was out there, stalking the streets of Millhaven, and I was the only one who could stop it. I strapped the silver dagger to my thigh, the metal cold against my skin. Then I headed out into the night, my senses on high alert. The hunt was on, and I wouldn't rest until the Revenant was destroyed. I made my way through the deserted streets, the only sound, the echo of my own footsteps. The moon hung low in the sky, its pale light casting long shadows across the pavement. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, tracking my every move. Suddenly, a scream rent the air, high and piercing. I spun around, my hand going to my gun. The sound had come from a nearby alleyway, and as I approached, I could hear the unmistakable sounds of a struggle. I rounded the corner, my weapon drawn, and froze at the sight that greeted me. The Lycan Revenant was there, hunched over the prone form of a young woman. Its teeth were buried in her throat, blood gushing from the wound as she thrashed weakly beneath it. I didn't hesitate. I opened fire, the silver bullets tearing through the creature's flesh. It howled in pain and rage, dropping its victim and whirling to face me. Its eyes blazed with a hellish light, its muzzle dripping with gore. I kept firing, the gun bucking in my hand. The Revenant staggered under the onslaught, but it didn't go down. With a roar, it charged, moving with blinding speed. I barely had time to react before it was on me, its claws tearing at my flesh. I felt a searing pain in my side, and then I was flying, thrown like a rag doll by the creature's inhuman strength. I hit the ground hard, the breath driven from my lungs. The Revenant loomed over me, its jaws gaping wide. I could see the madness swirling in its eyes, the hunger that could never be sated. I scrabbled for my dagger, my fingers closing around the hilt. The Revenant lunged, its teeth snapping inches from my face. With a cry of desperation, I brought the blade up, plunging it deep into the creature's chest. The Revenant let out an unearthly shriek, its body convulsing. I twisted the dagger, feeling the metal bite into its flesh, but the blade had not been blessed, and the creature's unholy strength was too great. With a howl of fury, the Revenant wrenched itself free. It staggered back, black ichor oozing from the wound, its eyes fixed on me, burning with a hatred that chilled me to the bone. With a final snarl, it turned and fled, disappearing into the shadows of the alley. I lay there for a long moment, gasping for breath. My side was on fire, and I could feel blood soaking through my shirt. But I was alive, and the Revenant, though wounded, was still out there. I dragged myself to my feet, wincing at the pain. I staggered over to the woman, feeling for a pulse. But it was too late. She was gone, her eyes staring sightlessly up at the sky. I bowed my head, a wave of grief and rage washing over me. I had failed her, just like I had failed Mallory, just like I had failed everyone who had ever counted on me. But I couldn't let it destroy me. I had to keep fighting, keep hunting. It was the only way to honor their memory, to give their deaths meaning. I pulled out my phone, dialing Sheriff Hansen's number. "We have another victim," I said when he answered, my voice heavy with sorrow. "And the Revenant. It's wounded, but still alive." Hansen was silent for a long moment. "Do what you need to do, Lucas," he said finally. "We'll take care of things here. Just be careful." The drive to the church was a blur, the events of the night replaying in my mind like a twisted horror movie. The woman in the alley, her throat torn out. The Lycan Revenant, its eyes blazing with unholy hunger. The dagger plunging into its chest, the blade unmarked by the beast's cursed flesh. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, the pain in my side a constant, throbbing reminder of how close I had come to death. But I couldn't afford to dwell on that now. I had a job to do, a monster to destroy. I pulled up outside the church, the ancient stone building looming like a sentinel in the darkness. I limped up the steps, the dagger heavy on my hip, and pounded on the heavy wooden door. For a long moment, there was silence. Then, the sound of footsteps, and the door creaked open to reveal Father Mikhail. His eyes widened as he took in my battered appearance, the blood staining my clothes. "My God, Lucas," he breathed. "What happened?" I pushed past him, into the dimly lit interior of the church. "The Revenant," I said, my voice tight with pain and exhaustion. "It attacked again." He took the dagger from me, laying it on the altar. Then he began to chant, his voice low and melodic. The words were in Latin, ancient and powerful, and as he spoke, I could feel the air grow heavy with the weight of the divine. The dagger began to glow, a soft, silvery light that seemed to pulse in time with his chanting. The metal shimmered and danced, as if alive, and I could feel the power emanating from it, a power that made my skin crawl and my heart race. And then, it was done. He lifted the dagger from the altar, the blade shining with a pure, radiant light. He handed it to me, his eyes solemn. "This blade has been blessed by the power of God," he said. "It will strike true against the Revenant, Lucas. But you must be careful. The creature will be drawn to it, like a moth to a flame. It will stop at nothing to destroy you, to claim the power of the blade for itself." I nodded, my fingers closing around the hilt. The metal was warm to the touch, almost alive, and I could feel the power thrumming through it, a power that made my heart race and my blood sing. "Thank you, Father," I said, my voice rough with emotion. "I won't let you down." Mikhail smiled sadly, laying a hand on my shoulder. "I know you won't, my son. But remember, the path ahead will be difficult." I climbed into my truck, ignoring the searing pain in my side where the creature's claws had torn into my flesh. The wounds were deep, but I'd survived worse. I'd have to push through the pain, just like I always did. Monster hunting wasn't a job for the weak. As I drove through the eerily quiet streets, a flicker of movement caught my eye. Something was lurking in the shadows of the old abandoned mill at the edge of town. Something big. Something that moved with a predatory grace that set my teeth on edge. I parked the truck and approached cautiously, the dagger gripped tight in my fist. The night air was thick with the stench of blood and decay, and every instinct I had screamed at me to run. But I couldn't. Not now. Not when I was so close to ending this nightmare. I saw it. The Lycan Revenant crouched atop a pile of moldering wooden beams, its eyes glowing a sickly yellow in the darkness. The creature was even more horrific up close, its body a twisted mass of matted fur and exposed muscle, its jaws dripping with viscous drool. It saw me at the same moment I saw it, and let out a roar that shook the earth. Then it was moving, bounding towards me with terrifying speed, its claws gouging deep furrows in the ground. I met its charge head-on, the blessed dagger flashing silver in the moonlight. The creature was fast, but I was faster. I ducked beneath its slashing claws and drove the blade deep into its chest, feeling the sickening crunch of bone and sinew. The Revenant howled in agony, black blood spurting from the wound, but it didn't fall. With a snarl of rage, it lashed out, its claws raking across my chest, shredding through my leather jacket like tissue paper. I stumbled back, gasping in pain. The creature pressed its advantage, its jaws snapping inches from my face. I could smell the reek of carrion on its breath, could feel the heat of its body as it bore down on me. But I wasn't done yet. With a roar of my own, I surged forward, driving my shoulder into the Revenant's chest. The creature staggered, off balance, and I pressed my attack, the dagger flashing in a deadly arc. Again and again I struck, the blade biting deep into the Revenant's flesh. The creature fought back with savage fury, its claws and teeth tearing at me, but I refused to yield. I poured all of my rage, all of my grief, all of my pain into each blow, driving the creature back step by step. And then, in a moment of terrible clarity, I saw my opening. The Revenant lunged, its jaws gaping wide, and I thrust the dagger up and into its throat. The blessed silver pierced through muscle and bone and burst out the back of the creature's neck in a spray of black blood. The Revenant convulsed, its eyes bulging in their sockets. It tried to roar, but all that came out was a wet, choking gurgle, and then it was falling, its massive body crashing to the ground with a shuddering impact. I stood over the creature's twitching corpse, my chest heaving, my body slick with blood and sweat. I waited for the sense of triumph, of victory, but it didn't come. All I felt was a hollow ache in my chest, a weariness that seemed to seep into my very bones. It was over. The Lycan Revenant was dead, its reign of terror finally at an end. But the cost had been high. Too high. The scars it had left on Millhaven, on me, would linger long after the body had crumbled to dust. But for now, for this one shining moment, I could rest.